Angry Bird plush toys. We all at least had one as a kid, and if you didn't, well, I find it hard to believe you managed to escape them. They were quite literally everywhere. Wally World? Ha! Child's Play. Toys R Us? That's a given. Shady mall vendors? Got that covered. Boarding and On Your Flight? Slightly unnerving, but okay. Cable cars in Singapore? Why not? On the streets of Moscow? Of course. In outer space? There is no escape. I believe my point is clear. For many, these plush toys hold a nostalgic place in our heart, as they were inextricably linked with what was the most iconic mobile game of all time. Open up the app, there they are. On the website, there they are. On their social media pages, there they are. Sold by the millions, these plush toys were a core part of what made the franchise what it ultimately became, serving as a huge source of revenue for Rovio, generating around $400 million in sales in 2012 alone. And how could you resist? They were remarkably high quality, yet never set you back more than $20 a piece. Such a success must have been headed by some bigwig toy company with loads of experience with gaming franchises in the past. But that wasn't the case. Today's video is not a story about Rovio, and it's not a story about Angry Birds the game. Although we will talk about them extensively, our focus today is on the little-known New York-based Commonwealth toy novelty, and the people really behind these plush toys. And while we're at it, let's recap the entire history of the characters from the classic game. Get cozy in your nest, peeps, because we're going down quite the rabbit hole. Cue the cat! Rovio Mobile was founded by 3 students from the Aalto University of Science and Technology in Helsinki, Finland. After success in a mobile game development competition and at the recommendation of a familiar face, they decided to form their own mobile game company, initially under the name Reload. Located in Espoo, Finland, the startup company was small, and at first the 3 founders did most of the work developing the games. By 2005, after receiving a small investment, the company expanded to 25 people and renamed itself Rovio. At this point, their goal was just to stay afloat, sustaining by doing projects for other companies such as Electronic Arts, but nothing garnered them enough independent commercial success to sustain revenue. Fortunately for them, the gaming landscape was set to shake up in 2007 with the release of the iPhone along with the Apple App Store. This solved distribution problems, but Rovio had yet to release a game that could top the charts. Acknowledging the competitiveness of the application market, Rovio developed some necessary criteria. Their next game had to be fast-paced, appealing to any and all audiences, and pending success, needed to be translatable to other platforms. And of course, it needed an app icon that could stand out from the rest. Despite their efforts, by early 2009, Rovio found itself on the brink of bankruptcy. Allow me to introduce you to Rovio CEO Michael Head, cousin of Nicholas Head, who was among the 3 founders. Michael was appointed as CEO in 2005, and despite concerns regarding the long-term prospects of the company, felt it was the right thing for him to do.
Right, so by 2009 we had already made some 50 games. Most of those were done as work for hire, but about 15 of them were our own games that we published. And we had done games that ranged, pretty much through all the genres. And up to that date, actually, funnily enough, our most successful game was a horror game series. But then when we came to 2009, we realized that we needed to change directions radically, and we really rethought everything we knew about making games, and we changed our strategy as well. From coming from a company that was serving all the different mobile gaming platforms, we chose to go to the iPhone.
All along, he knew they had to develop the perfect game to stay in business. And given they were already 51 games in and facing a dire situation, there was no better time to identify what exactly that would be. One afternoon in late March, in their office overlooking a courtyard in downtown Helsinki, game designer Jaakko Iisalo, who had been with the company since 2005, proposed a screenshot of some angry-looking birds with no visible legs or wings launching themselves at colorful geometric shapes. While the picture gave them no clue as to what type of game was being played, the staff liked the characters and the team elected to design a game around them. People saw this picture and it was just magical, said Nicholas. There was something about those characters, said Michael. These birds have no feet and can't fly, and they're really angry. We started to think about why they are so angry. For such simple characters, they made us think so much. There was some magic to it. After 8 months and over 100,000 euros spent, Rovio's pivotal project was ready to hit the scene. It would be called Angry Birds, debuting on the App Store on December 11th, 2009. One of Rovio's initial goals was to make a game that could appeal to everybody, so they made the premise incredibly simple. Players were to launch birds with unique abilities at structures containing green pigs using a slingshot, aiming with their finger on the touchscreen. A level was deemed complete once all the pigs were quote-unquote popped, but that's only part of the equation. A casual player could get through levels quickly with less stars rewarded, while more dedicated players could strive for perfection on each and every level. The result was a game that allowed users to play either a couple of seconds or a couple of hours, catering to the full spectrum of early mobile gamers. In an interview with GamePro, Michael had explained, "It has to be easy to pick up and play, but hard to master. The easy to learn part is really important to us. When you see one screenshot of the game, you know what you have to do. Angry Birds is simple, but it still has depth. It has to be so much fun that players want to return to the game over and over again." However, during its first 3 months, Angry Birds had failed to meet the expectations Rovio had hoped, at least as it pertains to the lucrative English-speaking markets. They had success in smaller neighboring countries, garnering roughly 40,000 paid downloads, but that hardly covered their development costs, and certainly wasn't saving the company from inevitable bankruptcy. Rovio had a contingency plan though, a way to reach more App Store consumers. They put the game out through Shillingo, an independent publisher which had been successful with several titles in the past, and had a good relationship with Apple. Once they proved the app's staying power in more markets, they went to Apple with Shillingo and said, "We've got something here." On February 11th, 2010, Apple agreed to feature Angry Birds on the front page of the UK App Store as Game of the Week. In preparation, Rovio made a YouTube trailer, only the second ever for an iPhone game, updated the game with 42 new levels with the Mighty Hoax level pack, and even released a free-to-play light version. The spotlight shot Angry Birds to new heights, topping the paid app charts in just about a month. The sales hit a different level, said Michael. It was April and we went to #1 in the US. And that's where it would stay for 275 consecutive days. Rovio at last had their hit. According to a contemporary source, Angry Birds had achieved over 4 million paid downloads by the end of June 2010, well on its way to becoming the most successful app of all time. And it was at this point that Rovio realized that Angry Birds had a potential to be far more than just a silly old time waster. They had the chance to turn these flightless avians into a full-fledged entertainment franchise. Just a few months prior, one Peter Vesterbacka reunited with Rovio, taking the position of the Mighty Eagle. That's quite literally what it says on his business card. Old curmudgeon newspaper outlets would prefer the title of Head of Business Operations. Substantially less appealing, but I suppose it is more descriptive. Anyways, it was at his recommendation back in 2003 that led to the formation of Rovio in the first place. So it's rather fitting he returned to take the Angry Birds franchise to the next level.
Rovio actually got started as a company 10 years ago in 2003. And it started actually out of a game making competition that I organized. So I happened to be working at HP and then organized this competition. Niklas and 2 of his friends, they were students at the Helsinki University of Technology. So then they actually took part, they created this game called King of the Cabbage World, and they won the competition. And after that they came to me and said, okay, now what? And then I said, okay, why don't you start a company to make games? And they started Rovio in 2003. And then, 51 games later, Angry Birds.
Vesterbacka and Head conceptualized their vision for the brand, which of course included more free updates for the original app as per their business model, but this is where talks of spin-offs, cartoons, and perhaps even movies took place. First and foremost, however, was merchandising, a path that nearly all recognizable brands experiment with. It's the most effective way to kick your revenue stream into overdrive, no pun intended. But like most, Rovio did not have the means to mass manufacture and distribute products in their lonesome. That isn't the job of a game developer anyways. It's the standard to license your characters out to a dedicated toy company that can take your ideas and turn them into reality. Rovio needed a proven partner that could do the heavy lifting for them, not only design several product lines from the ground up, but also manufacture and distribute said products to markets all around the world. But the question remained, would a prospective company even want to take Angry Birds on? Perhaps it was a flash in the pan and would precipitously lose its staying power at the top of the charts. It was unprecedented for an app to have such success, and would at a minimum be a different kind of pitch to these toy makers. There would need to be mutual interest, someone looking to try something new, and take the risk that Angry Birds was here to stay. In order to proceed with this story, we have to wind the clock back to 2009, where a small New York-based toy company, Commonwealth Toy and Novelty, fell in hard times, both financially and emotionally. Founded in 1934, they specialized in both licensed and unlicensed plush toys for children, but sales had slowed as kids exchanged their stuffed animals for these newfangled mobile devices. As difficult as it was to lay off trusted employees, the passing of the company's owner, Harvey Greenfield, was certainly their biggest loss. His son Stephen, along with his wife Lisa Seamus, came back to run Commonwealth with hopes of revitalizing the languishing business.
So currently, my title is chairman of the company, which sometimes people have CEO titles, sometimes people call themselves president. I took the chairman role on many, many years ago because we had a president at the time, but I've been running the company since I came back to the company in the year 2009. I'd been with the company many, many years. I'd been with the company from 1982 on a full-time basis until 1995, and I left, and then I came back in 2009, so I've been chairman since.
Seamus, who took on the role of executive vice president, knew they had to look for the non-obvious if Commonwealth was to escape its rut. That's where newly minted employee Alec Kessler suggested they sign a deal to license Angry Birds, the upstart mobile game that itself saved its company from closure. And so, with both sides in search of a business partner, Rovio sent their licensing agent to meet with Ms. Seamus at an industry convention in the summer of 2010. As both sides sensed untapped potential, they signed a deal that gave them the worldwide license for 20 items, including plush, vinyls, and outdoor toys. From there, product development officially began around what appears to be July of 2010. This would give them 5 to 6 months to develop the products, sell the retailers on them, and ship it all out just in time for the holidays. The ideal time for any toy company to launch a new line. First step in the process was visualizing what they wanted their product line to look like. This starts by commissioning an artist to create illustrations of the characters in toy form. These can be considered a proof of concept, especially when you place them on these product boards that you can use to sell prospective retailers. This early product lineup included a beanbag chair, plastic figurines, some kind of game, bird toss, and of course oodles of plush. You of course had your conventional plush toy with no fancy features or gimmicks, with 4 plain size variants: small, medium, large, and the backpack clip. Though there were early concepts that aimed to incorporate sounds from the game, such as the wacky whammers and the slingshotters. These were early attempts to make the products more toy-like. The following week, it was time to actually create some of these products as samples, beginning the back and forth between Rovio's approval team and Commonwealth's toy designers. Out of this emerged the first ever officially licensed Angry Bird plush. Drum roll, please. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been blue.
Check it out. Ah! Whoa, what's the matter? What the hell is that? A killer robot monster? Ah!
Okay, those were not it. Next week we will try again, okay? Better, I'd say so, but the blues still look like they're taking the look people in the eyes advice a little too seriously. In the meantime, let's check up on the slingshotter sample. Probably doesn't look too dull.
What the hell is even that?
I take it you're supposed to pull the tail, which will fire the toy in the direction you point? Not entirely sure? We'll figure it out. Finally, on July 26th, after nearly a month of discourse full of product concepts, samples, and annotated documents, they finally had what we would deem passable red and blue samples. The fabric colors obviously were not finalized, but at this point in the development process, the pattern is more important. Both longer and shorter fur samples were created to determine which were suitable for production. This is where we see the beginnings of the range's size variants, which I can only presume are the small, medium, large, and the backpack clip. The slingshotter concept was still being worked on too, and their patterns now mirrored the more conventional plush. And oh, that's how that works. Neat. But unfortunately, this would be as far as they ever got. When September rolled around, Angry Bird development ramped back up again, where we'd finally see Chucks, Bombs, and Matildas. Compared to how Red and Blue started out, these were far more impressive, being nearly identical, at least in makeup, to how they'd be in production. Frankly, the only inaccuracy in this bunch would be Bomb's tail. But to be fair, they likely weren't given full turnarounds of the characters, and just assumed he had one. This was also the stage where backpack clip development was truly being focused on, giving us some potentially familiar looking photos. Were they going to be plastic clips? Were they going to be keychains? Stay tuned to find out. Now we had the main 5 birds, but you cannot claim to have a complete set without the bad piggies, the characters you see in every level in the game. Are you ready to see the first ever pig? Dating back to September 2nd, 2010, here he is, glued on paper detailing and all. Difficult to mess up something so simple, you'd think, but I'd like to see you try this from scratch. 2 more rounds of samples yielded the final-ish product, which served as a template for the other 3 pigs: Helmet Pig, Mustache Pig, and King Pig. Notably, the Helmet Pig was unique amongst the bunch, as he was based on the damage render of the character.
Well, you're right that working with licensors usually is a very intense process. And that gets more and more intense and has gotten more and more intense over the course of my career. Many, many years ago, people were much more lax. Now people are very tight. But in the case of Rovio with Angry Birds, it was a brand new company. They were a brand new company and we were a small company. So when we first got into Angry Birds, there really wasn't a licensing team. It was a few people working there at the company. So it was really easy. We would get on a call. I forgot what it wasn't really FaceTime or Zoom call, but we have some kind of a picture. And they would see the toy. We'd say, "Hey, guy, here is what it is." And they'd say, "Hey, cool, go ahead." So it was really easy and working together early on. We made a couple of trips, so that was great. As time went on, over the course of the 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years we had the license, then it got much more intense and it got more specific because they were dealing with a lot of products. They were adding more people to their team. So it became more professional, if you will, than the beginning and I'm not saying it was amateurish, but it was much more collaborative and it was easier to do.
October was set to be a big month for Commonwealth, as they were slated to attend the Dallas Toy Fair, where they would attempt to sell the proposed product lineup to retailers. This included plush toys both large and small, many of which were sitting cozy in these retail platforms that were co-developed with the plushies. Fun bit of trivia, these are referred to as PDQs internally, which technically stands for Product Displayed Quickly, but those in the know would prefer the term pretty damn quick. This was an impressive display to be sure. Frankly, if I were there on the behalf of a retailer, I wouldn't be able to resist the urge to snuggle with every last one. And because I have video, I can confirm that these samples were the first to receive sound chips, which you can see remnants of on the early samples with these Velcro pockets. In this batch, the Velcro compartment was moved to the underside of each toy, which housed a sound box with replaceable LR44 batteries. The sounds it played were ripped straight from the game, though unfortunately were not specific to each character, but we'll touch on this later. As Miss Seamus recalls, this line was a difficult sell because this whole mobile game scene was unfamiliar territory for these retailers. Nobody knew if 10 million downloads was good.
One back, I can see here. You have a big size. Now come on inside, you come follow me in. Always different ones over here, right? Okay, we got all the little die tiny ones. And we got a bunch of the big ones. I'm going to show you. We got all these great things here. Figures here, pigs, little babies. See? Pigs now too. See? Pigs, birds, juggle birds. And then we got some new pillows down here. Like this.
Following their debut at Dallas, the designs of the birds and the pigs would be finalized come late October, as their proposed launch date loomed closer. These plushies would star in the first ever stock images, which would go on to be used to advertise their products in their infancy. Kinda crazy to see the uncropped versions, right? In the following days, production officially began, featuring finalized colors and patterns for the original 5 birds, with pigs to come towards the end of the year. Luckily, the whole retailer thing worked out by November, as the game's numbers continued to climb, and several big names in the retail world came around on our beloved Angry Birds. Whatever inventory they created clearly wasn't enough, as all was accounted for in just 2 hours. And they thought it would take weeks. Seamus recalls jumping and screaming in their office as the entire Commonwealth staff popped bottles of champagne to commemorate their success. From an outside perspective, this played out far differently. Since Angry Birds' ascent to the top of the charts, fans around the world were clamoring for quite literally any piece of Angry Bird merchandise, and that's where unlicensed products took center stage. For months, they were the only products we could buy to sport our passion for the characters we all loved. So you can only imagine what fans thought when this photo emerged into the scene. On September 24th, 2010, multiple reports surfaced regarding some admissible Angry Bird toys in the streets of Manhattan.
So that photo of the red toy in the box, that was taken by someone on the corner of 25th Street and 6th Avenue in New York City. That's where our offices were at the time. I was home and I was sick, and I needed to see some toys, and I needed to do some work with my assistant. So she took a box downstairs and was hailing a taxi cab to come up to my apartment to work with me. And someone snapped that picture and posted it. That was the first picture that was posted. It was when that picture went what we used to call viral then, which is probably different than viral now. When that picture hit and went all across the world, we knew we had something great on our hands. It was great. It's funny because she was nervous and she thought maybe someone was going to try and steal it from her.
Fans were in a frenzy to find out more. They wouldn't have to wait long as Rovio's US advisor Peter Levin leaked the full collection just a week later to Geek Chic Daily. The image depicted a PDQ full of plushies in various sizes with the aforementioned Jumbo Red at their side. This would be our first official look at the Commonwealth Angry Bird plushies, and also remains the only documented evidence of the first ever Chuck Bomb and Matilda. Geek Chic would get the next inside scoop as well, as a sneak peek of the line would be uploaded to YouTube on October 13th.
Alright, but on my right, and I'm slowly moving here for all you Angry Birds fans, there was breaking news recently that Angry Birds is coming out with merchandise with, toys and products. Well, this hasn't been seen, I don't think, in person by any of you. It's an Angry Birds, this is like a huge, gigantic toy. Check that out. Chris, can you hold this? What would you say, a plush toy? It's like a plush toy. This is a gigantic Angry Bird. Oh my God. How jealous are you right now? Oh, and then there's more. Oh my God. It's Angry Bird Mania.
Whack 'em.
Whack. Oh, this is a first ever seen. I don't think anyone's seen this before. They have little noises when you whack them. This is great. All right, your first look at the Angry Birds merch.
The next major sneak would come just about a week later on the 21st, as the first high-resolution full-color shots of the plushies emerged. These photos will go on to be used on various websites as well, and like the other sets, showcase the birds with their placeholder colors. Note the orange beaks and the saturated colors. To many's dismay, however, retailers stayed pretty much mum on the matter of pricing and availability, leaving would-be buyers in the dark with the holidays quickly approaching. But exactly 1 week later, on October 28th, a tipster told TechCrunch.com that Rovio planned to unveil them on their website the next day. but that didn't stop another toy store from putting them up early. The store in question here was Toy Wiz, a trusted distributor run by Kenny Shamus of all people, who claimed that the Angry Bird plush toys would be shipping in December. Furthermore, they went ahead and pinned a price on them, $14.99 each. With 5 different 8-inch birds available, Red, the Blues, Chuck Bomb, and Matilda, that brought the price for the full set up to around $75 before tax and shipping. The pigs would be added later, with their pre-orders set to ship in February. With all this news materializing in just a month, anticipation was at an all-time high, and when the set officially debuted for pre-order on October 29th on shop.angrybirds.com, they instantly became the #1 item on consumers' holiday wish lists. Though in their short-sightedness, Rovio dramatically underestimated demand, with customers having reported paid with the full expectation of shipment during the holiday season, only to be told that their orders would not be fulfilled until January. Customers that contacted Rovio received this email. Due to unforeseen demand for Angry Bird plush toys, our logistics and customer service have been overwhelmed, and we have not been able to respond promptly to all queries. If you have already contacted us regarding your order, our staff is working on the case to resolve any problems, and you will receive a reply at the earliest opportunity. And just when you thought you had seen everything, another leak made the rounds on the internet. This one was after the pre-order window opened, but before shipping. And this time, it was the most baffling instance yet, although nobody made a stink about it at the time. This time, it was courtesy of, and yes, I am being 100% serious here, YouTube user MissJenna678 in a video entitled Angry Bird Toys So Cute / Funny. Who? What? How? Yeah, I don't know either. This video remains one of the earliest examples of Commonwealth plushies in the hands of the public, and nobody who I've talked to has provided me with a convincing explanation of how they ended up here. You can see several pig samples, this rather strange red pillow, and the classic 5 birds in all sorts of sizes, including a jumbo bomb with a tail. The reason I make note of that bootleg-looking red pillow is because the exact same pillow would reappear inside this Angry Birds themed mini convertible for the Angry Birds Day 2010 celebration in Manhattan. And whose car do you think that was? Take a wild guess, it was Commonwealth. And so were the costumes, though they were a handmade job. Even if you weren't keeping up with all this nonsense, which I'm sure you weren't, don't lie, odds are you have seen this infamous image at some point. A nondescript wooden table completely filled with various samples. This was posted to Facebook on November 16th by Rovio themselves, marking the first time they publicly acknowledged the merchandise. But enough of this tangent, the plushies were out, and in the hands of over 60,000 consumers. The initial pre-orders were only for what we now consider to be the 8-inch toys though, with no sound feature. If you wanted another size variation, you'd have to wait until 2011. The 2 online shops we'll be monitoring closely in this video, Toy Wiz and shop.angrybirds.com, would continue to update their catalog with more size variations and characters in the last few days of December 2010 and the first few weeks of January 2011. Toy Wiz in particular had quite the selection, including deluxe 8-inch versions of all the characters, miniature 5-inch birds, a few backpack clips, as well as the jumbo 16-inch red we had seen back in September. The 5-inch toys were $12.99 each, the backpack clips were $6.99 each, and the jumbo red was $49.99. Each plush came with a paper hang tag, practically identical to the highly recognizable app icon. The backside had copyright information, manufacturing codes, as well as the item's barcode. There would also be a paper sewn-in label affixed along the back seam of the plush. Would like to point out that these early variations had what we now consider to be the original Angry Birds logo, with the older font and accenting blue feathers. Also notable to point out that none of these came with sound chips, but that feature was coming soon, I assure you. Jumbo variants of the other birds would be added to Toy Wiz around the 3rd week of February, with pre-order shipping in June. First order of business for Commonwealth in 2011 was finishing their tour of the major toy shows, as they attended both the Hong Kong and New York toy fairs with their entire lineup of Angry Birds. The New York convention, which at the time was an annual event held in February at the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center in Manhattan, showcased a handful of never-before-seen plush bundles. And for those with a keen eye, you might even catch a glimpse of brand new characters. A few more last-minute concepts are thrown around before the retail launch, including a line of plush with built-in speakers. A blue was illustrated for the product board while 2 reds were sampled. They are fully functioning and can be plugged into any device via an auxiliary cable. Around the final week of February, in-person retailers such as Toys R Us, FYE, Barnes & Nobles, and Hot Topic would finally stock their shelves with the plushies, crucially with sound for the very first time. This included the original 5 birds, Red, the Blues, Chuck Bomb, and Matilda, as well as the 4 Bad Piggies, Minion Pig, Helmet Pig, Mustache Pig, and King Pig. Okay, to be clear, only the Minion Pig was distributed in this first batch, as the other 3 would technically come the next wave. Even though you could already buy the 8-inch scale versions online, so if you really wanted that Helmet Pig, e-commerce was the way. And to be completely factual, some retailers did receive the 2010 style non-chip 5-inch birds in the original #1 at PDQ in December 2010. These would be your conventional mall outlets and the like, though they were exceedingly rare. You should refer to these as the first ever 5-inch toys, and if you're looking for one, they are surprisingly distinguishable. With that said, I consider this February batch to be the first mass retail release. Confusing rollout, I know, get used to it. This initial wave would only be stocked as backpack clips 5-inch and 8-inch. Unlike the pre-orders, these plushies would receive hang tags with the revised Angry Birds logo, though the sewn-in labels would continue to use the older logo for some reason. This one oddly specific photo shows otherwise, though is the only instance I've seen of this. Subsequent production runs would change this logo to match the one in the hang tag, though printed in black to contrast from the white. Now, you might have also seen the 8-inch toys came in these, what we call them, platforms. For whatever reason, you could still find these with hang tags with the older logo, although the box itself will always have the newer logo. Plushies of this variety will always have sound and were typically sold in stores like Toys R Us. In Eastern Asian markets, even the 12-inch toys had these platforms. As for those factory codes I mentioned earlier, you're probably wondering what exactly they mean. They're certainly not meaningless. In fact, for the purposes of this video, they're quite useful for creating a coherent timeline. Let's start with this code, which we would call the HK number. This is the factory code, which is an internal code Commonwealth used to designate their factories. HK stands for Hong Kong, which is obviously where the factory is located, and the number corresponds to a specific one in that region. For example, HK12 is factory number 12, or the 12th factory Commonwealth worked with in Hong Kong, and HK98 would refer to the 98th factory Commonwealth worked with. I bring those two up because those codes are the most common two that will appear in these early releases. The second code is perhaps more telling, as it is called the date code. It is a letter followed by a number, which will tell you the exact month and year your item is from. Obviously, the 10 refers to 2010. This would be an 11 for 2011, 12 for 2012, and so forth. But the letter is where people get confused. By process of elimination, this must stand for the month. But how are you supposed to translate it? Thankfully, it's in alphabetical order. A stands for January, B is for February, C is for March, D is for April, E is for May, F is for June, G is for July, H is for August, I is for September, J is for October, K is for November, and finally L is for December. Intuitively, this should make sense, and based on what I've told you so far, this information should back up what I've said. If your plush does not have this code or it's a different code, there's a small chance it may be a sample, but more likely it's a production variant where they omitted it. All plushies purchased at Toys R Us, for instance, will have a code that looks like this. I would encourage you to remember this information for the remainder of the video, as I'll be referencing these codes fairly often to, again, create a chronological sequence of events.
We put factory codes, this little designation on the sewn labels of all of our toys, primarily so we know which factory produced it in case we use multiple factories. You know, if we only produce in one factory, we don't really need it for ourselves. But we just started keeping track years and years ago. It was an internal thing just so we'd be able to look at product fast, look at our purchase orders fast. You don't know this on our internal POs. We have the factory code in there so we can tell who the factory is quickly. Just a way of identifying it. Nowadays, now you've got to put date codes and other code information on labels so that in case of a recall, you can get to know which products to recall faster. But our factory codes all predeceased that, and it was more of an internal thing. And we used the letters HK stood for Hong Kong or China factories. Years ago, we had Ks and Ts when we produced products in Korea or Taiwan or Thailand was TH. So the code, the MHB, which looks like a little heart on all of our stolen labels, was actually a family thing. So I mentioned at one point, this is a family business. My grandfather started the business. My grandfather's name was Murray. His wife's name was Betty. After they died, we put an M and a B on the bottom of every toy. And then when my dad passed away, his name is Harvey, we expanded it to have the M and the B with an H in between. So if you look carefully, it looks like MHB. Some people don't realize it's an H in between, but those three letters refer to my grandfather, my grandmother, and my father. By the way, one problem we have in this industry, and we had with Angry Birds, is people were copying the product. They were ripping off. And in some cases, they copy the individual MHB. I had one problem that really bothered me when Rovio let a South American company have the rights to make some products, even though I had the rights as well. What bothered me the most about that was I wasn't happy that they gave someone else the rights while I had a contract, but the company didn't really have any manufacturing expertise. They simply took our samples and sent our samples to their own factory to produce the product. They were so amateurish, this particular company, they actually copied the MHB logo onto their product because they didn't know what it was. They just assumed it was something that was necessary and copied it, which really got me, pretty aggravated at the time.
Now, for a quick review of the plushies themselves. They are the subject of this video after all. I wouldn't call any of them particularly spectacular, and they weren't exactly intended to be. They for sure captured their appearance in the game and had manufacturer-friendly designs with no printing whatsoever. Simple layers of fabric and embroidered sections was all that was necessary. Red is an excellent example of this strategy, as he would clearly be the plush they produce in the highest volume, so we need to be simplistic. This could potentially explain why he's missing his darker feather spots. Otherwise, all the details were there. Tan underbelly, protruding head and tail feathers in game-accurate quantities, and nicely embroidered facial features. The larger variants would utilize felt sections highlighted by embroidery, as full embroidery becomes increasingly difficult and rather ugly as surface area increases. He would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch, along with the backpack lip. You can tell Rovio didn't scrutinize the blues as much as they should have, as you can evidently see around back. They should have 2 tail feathers, not 3. But this is such a small detail and hardly takes away from the plush. You'll be looking at the front the majority of the time anyways. And again, in defense of Commonwealth, they likely weren't given full turnarounds for the character, and just assumed he had 3 tail feathers like Red. Other than that, they look nice, albeit a bit creepy with that dead stare. They would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch, along with the backpack lip. The dead stare design was carried over to Chuck as well, but his eyes are not nearly as big in proportion to his body, so it doesn't look as jarring. Unlike the others, Chuck of course is a triangular shape, translated to plush form remarkably well I must admit. Unlike the other 2, even his smaller variants use felt eyes with embroidered accents. Unsure why they decided to use 2 different methods, but that's just what they did. Also, like the blues, Chuck has one glaring issue that might annoy you if you interact with the plush often. His white underbelly does not carry over to his underside fabric, which was either an oversight or a production limitation at the time. He would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch, along with the backpack lip. The original Bomb plush has always been a fan favorite because Commonwealth did such an amazing job right off the bat. Aside from those tail feathers we mentioned earlier, but luckily they snipped those off before production began. Between his embroidered eyes, you'll also find his signature glare. Also known as his spot, this white embroidered detail can only be found on plushies produced from October 2010 until February 2011. At some point during the latter month, it would be removed?
As a perfect example of how things were in the beginning, the Bomb, in the very early days, the toys we made had a white dot on the forehead. I don't know whether everyone is aware of that. We made the dot. We put the dot on because the artwork we had showed a dot, and we had gotten some approval by some of the people in the team, and we went into production. And then I would say, it was sometime 6-8 months later, We had just gotten the product out in the marketplace. We made our first trip over to Finland, and we were sitting in a meeting, and a guy came into the meeting who was introduced to us as the original creator of the game. I forget what his name is at this point. And when we're sitting there, he hadn't really seen the toys at that point. He wasn't really involved in the process. And maybe we had been there once before, but I think he was out of the office, so maybe he hadn't been there for the first approval meeting. So he came in and he looked at the black dot, the black bomb, and he said, "Why is there a white dot?" And we're like, "What do you mean, why is there a dot? That's the artwork." And he goes, "There's no dot." And he came over and showed us his artwork. Apparently, the dot was a reflection in some of the artwork that had appeared, and we all thought it was a dot, and nobody caught that. So that's sort of how the process went, and that's actually the explanation for why that dot exists on those first early runs of products.
The Spot variant would only be available in 5-inch and 8-inch as it was produced before they introduced the larger sizes and the backpack clip. The revised version would be sold in all sizes. Matilda, if you discount the original bomb, I think is the best of the original bunch. She has a unique egg shape along with all of her facial details and accurately shaped feathers. She even has a dome-shaped beak. Now, some of you might say she would be even better if you could make her crap an egg just like in the game. And to that I'd say, they had that in mind. Makes the plush look wonky from pretty much every angle, but I mean, how cool is that? She would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch, along with the backpack clip. The backpack clip, for whatever reason, was omitted from most retail assortments. Did they not think she was worthy? Was it a shipping issue? Sound chips for the birds played one of 3 sounds from the game. The blues battle cry, a resounding hooray, and the stage completion celebration. This was the same in every bird, as unique sound chips would never be introduced for this assortment. The Minion Pig, like Red in terms of their iconicity, did not have any extravagant details, and it's not like you need that. It's a perfect plush in nearly every respect, as it exudes that dopey yet innocent vibe we came to know from the game. Felt eyes, extruded snout, off-center ears, but no tail. You can pretend the sewn-in label is the tail for now. He would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch, along with the backpack clip. Helmet Pig, as mentioned, is the only character represented in his damaged appearance. That makes this plush rather special, though I'm sure you would have liked to have seen what an uninjured one would look like. Why they decided to pull this act with Helmet Pig and Helmet Pig alone is anybody's guess, though I would assume the art they were provided was of the injured render. The plush itself is perhaps the most detailed of the lot, with all sorts of embroidered details on his face and for the cracks on his helmet accessory. There's even a cutout to represent the hole present on his render. He is anything but a modified Minion Pig. Good fun. And for those who have removed the helmet, well, you know. He would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch. A backpack clip was planned and could be seen at the Dallas Toy Fair, but he did not make it to production. Just like Helmet Pig, Mustache Pig has his own distinct pattern, although he's not injured. He's got embroidered eye bags, peanut-shaped nostrils, and a felt section representing his iconic stash. He would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch. A backpack clip was planned and could be seen at the Hong Kong Toy Fair, but again, he did not make it to production. To the untrained eye, King Pig may just appear to be a standard Minion Pig, but with a crown. But he too had his own unique pattern, a detail that even Commonwealth's own factories had a propensity to miss.
The reason you might find, and what some people would refer to as an error, or a toy that might look a little bit different out there, maybe a King Pig would have the king's crown on the wrong pig, on a mustache pig or something along those lines. Is because factories would possibly make mistake. If you've got thousands of pieces going down a line, maybe one from the next line and the next table over got mixed in and somebody didn't realize it. They sewed the crown on and they said, okay, and nobody realized it. Or maybe they realized it and said, you know, it's not a big deal, stick it in there because there's so many going down the line. These are only toys that are a couple of dollars, $10, what have you. They're not. We are an unusual company. We have many inspectors working in our factories, watching the factories, making sure the quality is right. We want to make sure the sewing is done right. If there are parts, they won't come off, and generally making sure the quality is up to our standards. But people miss things, and sometimes it happens, and you miss it. You know, we want the seams to be straight, not crooked. You know, but sometimes things happen. Usually we pick up those kinds of things. We'll do a general inspection. We might take up 25, 30 toys, and if one is defective, we'll reject it and make people rework the lot. But that would be looking for holes in toys and seams that are off. If the king crown was on the wrong toy, somebody probably wouldn't have noticed it, and you've got something that's out there. Same thing happens with the U.S. Mint. You hear about coins being misprinted or slightly off. They go down the line, they're still good, and therefore, you have something out there that ends up being a unique collector's piece.
He has irregular shaped eyeballs rather than circular ones, which you can sort of understand when taking a look at the original artwork, but any other angle clearly shows that this was just because he has a bulbous snout. His nostril embroidery is also slightly different, though of course what sets him apart from his peasants is his shiny gold crown, stitched to the top of his head off-center. The smaller toys receive this one-sided accessory, though at some point during production, the larger sizes 12-inch and up will get a higher quality double-layered version. Interestingly, if you have a larger variation without sound, you still get the rubbish one. Yes, even the 16-inch. And even if yours did have sound but was an early release, you still wouldn't get the upgrade, making the crown quite the luxury. The king would be available in 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch, along with the backpack clip. As to not make things awkward, the pigs of course got their own unique sound chip. To nobody's surprise, this was the pigs' euphonious laughter from when you fail a level. The reason why you see all these size variations is because of price points. Commonwealth wanted to offer products across a wide range of prices, from entry level 5-inch at around $10 to the special occasion 16-inch for $50 to $60. It was around this time, however, that they experimented with other size variations as samples, with one even making it to production briefly. From the 6-inch, 7-inch, 9-inch, 10-inch, 11-inch, to even the 14-inch, 6.5-inch variations would make it to retail around the beginning of their run. They were done once and can be identified by an additional barcode affixed via a sewn-in label, and were never produced again. Was a step too far perhaps, a price bracket that didn't need to be filled. These were sold at Kmart stores in the latter half of 2011, so that little barcode tag can be viewed as their signature touch.
So when it comes to what size to make our products in, specifically with Angry Birds, we sort of have a bit of a template. We knew we wanted to be in that 5-inch range. We knew we wanted to have another 8-inch range, and then 12s and the bigger ones. And the reason for that is all about price points. It's essentially retail price points. You have an idea. And maybe you want to have a $10 toy, a $15 toy, or a $20 toy because you know where the market's going to be. You don't want to be too close. You want to spread things out. So most of the toy companies, the plush toy companies, sort of have it that gauge. Nowadays, there are a lot of blind bag products that are $4.99 or $5.99. So you sort of have that set up. We set it up with Angry Birds early on. We did the 5s and the 8s because we wanted 2 price points. And then we wanted a couple bigger ones. We knew the bulk of the product would be in the 5 and the 8-inch size, so most of the characters got made in those. But when we get to the bigger sizes, you knew that people weren't going to be able to spend $20, $30, $40, even more for every single character. You're not going to get everybody collecting. You might get some special collectors wanting it. So you limit it to the ones that you think are the most popular. So the bigger I went, the least I had. I mean, if I were going to make a 4-foot size, it would always be Red because he was the most iconic. And you figure that most people would want Red. Or maybe it would be Bomb or something along the lines like that. Same thing happened when we got into some of the other extensions. Same thing. We might make all 6 characters in the 5-inch size, all 6 characters in the 8-inch size, but once we got up to the next sizes, we'd cut back to the ones that we thought were the most desired. We might have a few floating around of all the characters, but the white bird, for example, would rarely make it to the bigger sizes because we knew that was the least popular. Now, in the collector's market, 10 years later, it's a whole different world. That's the reason why people probably want more of the white bird, because we didn't have that many out there.
Remember those box sets from Toy Fair 2011? What better way to collect the set than by buying them in bundles, right? You get a neat box, it looks all fancy, and you're on your merry way. However, these early box sets were not exactly easy to acquire. In fact, essentially nobody owns them. Not because they've thrown the box away, which I'm sure plays a minor role in their extinction today, but there's little to no documentation of these even existing outside of these Toy Fair photos. You'll find one, and I mean one, documented listing for this 5-pack on WorthPoint, a well-known eBay archiving site. Heck, if you didn't know any better, you'd be right to assume these were done up as samples. One of a kind. Figuring out what exactly these things were was certainly no easy feat, though we at least had some clues to work off. The single pack, double pack, and 5-pack were all adorned with a Sony Ericsson logo, which was Sony's mobile phone brand at the time. Seems like a natural partnership for what ultimately is a mobile phone game, so perhaps these were related to a Sony mobile phone promotion. Indeed, that's what they were for, but somebody find me the terms for the promotion. You're not gonna find it by a quick Google, that's for sure. Thankfully, you don't have to, as I've got the promotion details right here. And right away, you'll realize why these are so rare. These were given away as a gift with purchase of Sony Xperia models, in Hong Kong of all places. Based on the model you bought, you'd receive one of two box sets, the single pack and the double pack. This section here directly states, and I quote, "Buying an X10 HD will get you a box with two products, a bird and a pig. While buying an X8, X10 Mini Pro, X10 Mini, Vivaz, or Vivaz Pro will get you a box with one product, a bird or a pig." The 5-pack, however, was apparently a Facebook giveaway, where participants picked their favorite Angry Birds style in order to enter the sweepstakes. Nowhere does it state there were multiple winners, though there could have been. Regardless, this makes this box set perhaps the rarest piece of officially licensed merchandise we will ever look at. This article was published on February 26, 2011, so presumably that's approximately when the promotion began. We may never have all the answers, but at least we know where they came from, and for those who have them in hand like me, the box indicates they were not for retail sale. And hey, wait a minute, those plushies do not look like the 5-inch ones. The other packs have them, but why do these look different? Allow me to explain. A 6 4-inch size variation was initially sold in limited numbers here in the US, but was more readily available in the UK and later other European countries. These slotted exactly between the 5-inch toys and the 3-inch backpack clips, and often came with sound. These were sold individually, but are often associated with multi-packs, and that is because they would be bundled in the 4-packs. Unlike the early Sony boxes, these could be purchased at retail. They were supposed to come in 2 different variants, but there are 3 because of some UK shenanigans. Officially, there is the first variant, which contained a 4-inch Red, Matilda, Bomb, and Minion Pig. The second variant carried a 4-inch Red, the Blues, Chuck, and King Pig. This allowed you to get every character Commonwealth offered in 4-inch, including King Pig, who was exclusive to the 4-pack. Helmet Pig and Mustache Pig were once again shafted, though samples were made at some point. These were intended to be a consumer-friendly way of acquiring full-scale plushies of the characters at a lower price point, so the 4-inch size was a good fit, though sound chips had to be cut. For the UK, Commonwealth's distribution partner, Character Options, imported variants that came with Red, the Blues, Chuck, and a Minion Pig. I take it Character didn't want to import 2 different styles of 4-packs, so this acted as a pseudo best of 4-pack. The 4-pack was not the only multi-pack sold at retail, however. In fact, it pales in comparison to the others, which are far more obscure and arguably more desirable. There was also a 3-pack sold, supposedly exclusive to Barnes & Noble stores, but in actuality that wasn't the case. This pack came with a 4-inch Red, Chuck, and Bomb, all with sound. These next 2 bucked the trend of the 4-inch minis though, as they came with the more conventional 5-inch plushies. An extremely obscure 2-pack was also sold in Finnish stores, which as you will recall was Rovio's home country, and was distributed by Ammo Toys for that market. But the coolest pack of all was the limited edition 9-pack, also known as the Battle Pack, which came with all 9 plushies from the original set. This was supposed to be an FAO Schwarz exclusive. For those that don't know, that's a famous toy store in New York, but was later sold in the Times Square Toys R Us and in Russia apparently, presumably distributed by Commonwealth's Russian partner General Freight. Now, there was also plans to release a 3-pack with the 5-inch toys as well, presumably also for the Finnish market, but that one never made it to production. I brought up distributors for the first time today, and although their involvement may seem superfluous from the perspective of the average consumer, for a collector, they make our lives unnecessarily difficult. Commonwealth would designate markets outside of the US to other toy companies. Since each one of these companies already has the infrastructure set up in their country to market and sell these toys, it's best to leave that work to them and split the profits. Here's a comprehensive list of every distributor and the country they operate in. As we have discussed, some of these distributors would receive exclusive products for their region, and for us completionists, we have to be aware of what this entails. Adding to the insanity of it all, some countries had multiple distributors, such as Finland. We already touched on Ammo Toys, who serve some Finnish cities, but there was also Rovio themselves, who operate in others. That, and they presided over nearly all the European Angry Bird retail stores, aka the greatest works of art in the history of the human race. Rovio actually sold exclusive variants of the backpack clips that came with color match clips. If you couldn't tell before, for production, Commonwealth swapped the clip colors on the birds. Red and Bombs clips were swapped, as well as the blues and Chuck. Whether this was for aesthetic purposes or not is unknown. What we do know is that they corrected this only for Rovio imports, in a small handful of US releases, but that's besides the point. Rovio imports were not sold on a card back either, which is something you'd often see on the North American releases. This isn't to say hang tags are Rovio exclusive, as they were sold that way in all markets alongside the carded versions, but don't expect to find a color match clip with a carded backer.
It's somewhat unusual nowadays for one company to have the distribution rights to a plush toy or even a branded plush toy all over the world or in many markets. Some of the really big companies might, if they create something, if Mattel or Spin Master or Hasbro create their own product, they might have the rights. But a lot of times you might have different companies in different marketplaces having the rights. In the case of Angry Birds, nobody knew what Angry Birds was when we first got involved in June, I think May or June of 2010. So we got the worldwide rights because nobody knew what it was, nobody understood the value of it. Hell, the value of Angry Birds a year after we were there was 100 times worth the license. So we got the worldwide rights. Now the question was, as the thing began to explode, was what the best way? It was better for us to use distributors throughout the world who knew the local markets, knew every retailer in every country, and that's why we would sell through these kinds of people. We would work on less profit, they would work on less profit, so together the pricing still worked. And it's a fairly common practice for that to happen. And every country, we'd work with retail. I've been in business a long time. We had a lot of friends who were in the business, people we've done business with before. Although in the case of Angry Birds, I think we ended up in about 60 different countries. So I was selling it to some countries we'd never sold into. But it's a small toy world. We know each other. People have reputations. And I would call up some of my friends and tell them, hey, there's a brand new thing we've got. They wouldn't even know it's popular yet. And I could call someone in XYZ country and say, I've got this thing. It's going to be phenomenal. You could call up or let me send you in some product, blah, blah, blah. Typically, then each distributor would figure out what they want to carry in their market, depending upon what kind of stores they have, what kind of price points, and sometimes they would carry everything. Sometimes they would carry lesser products. So maybe one guy would want the winter assortment, one guy might not want the winter assortment, and they would show it to their customers ahead of time, get a feel for what their customers would want to buy and what they'd want to put in the stores, and go from there.
Another instance of a regional exclusive product could be found in the UK, once again as an import from Character. Bean-filled variations of the Jumbo plushies appeared out of nowhere, and while they can be considered a completely different product than the plush toys, they have a striking resemblance to them that's difficult to ignore. There is little to no documentation of the set. Only decent photos we have are courtesy of fellow plush collector Ewan Plush Studios. There would later be these similar beanbags sold in the Thorpe Park shop in the UK Angry Birds land, but these were imported by another company and have a slightly different pattern. In the interest of not going on too long, I'll cut to the chase. Let this be a lesson. Do not be deceived by counterfeits. Though these may appear to be yet another obscure regional exclusive, those with a keen eye will notice that the MHB signature is not actually an MHB, it's an M-B. Right there, dead giveaway. That would not be on an official Commonwealth. And apparently, you gotta be on the lookout for smaller variants as well. Just find the fabric loop and you're all set. Whoever the bootlegger here was clearly wasn't as clever as they thought. Though you've gotta hand it to them, they almost got away with it.
A lot of people talk about knockoffs and counterfeits in the industry. My own personal feeling in stuffed animals, I consider a knockoff to be something that sort of looks like the product, whereas counterfeit is something actually trying to pass it off as being identical. So if I were selling a stuffed animal that was, let's say it was a can of Coke, and somebody then came out with a can of Diet Right Cola, I would say it's a knockoff. They're doing something similar because they know that I'm having a success with a Plush can. Whereas a counterfeit would be someone making the same piece and trying to pass it off. We've experienced both when we Angry Birds. There were people that came out with all kinds of other flying creatures that looked like different kinds of birds, and they were calling them Angry Birds. You'd see them all over the stores, or you see them in the street corners. That I would call a knockoff. You know, sometimes you can stop them, sometimes you can't. Counterfeit's a whole different thing. There were counterfeits all over New York City. You see guys selling them on the street corners all the time, and I don't know who was really doing that, and I would get really angry, but there's just so much that you can do. But there was one story. I got a phone call one day from Rovio, it was early on, the first year or two, telling us that some stuff was stopped at the port in England, and the quality of our toys were horrible. They were really upset that the toys were terrible. There was smudging on the tags, the seams were bad, wasn't the quality, and they were really upset on the phone, and I got really upset. So I immediately called up the person who runs my office in Hong Kong, which oversaw all the production, and I was really getting very upset with them. Like, how could we let this thing happen, blah, blah, blah. And I jumped the gun because within about 2 or 3 hours, I was getting pictures from Rovio of what was found at the pier. Well, it turned out we didn't make the product. It was somebody had counterfeited the product. And the reason we figured it out, there were 2 sizes of toys in this container. And when we looked at pictures, the same barcode was on both. So whoever counterfeited the toys didn't bother to make 2 separate tags like we did, and by putting the same tag on the 2 different size toys, I knew right away it wasn't us because my people were too good at it. So I had egg in my face. I had to apologize, of course, guys who worked for me. But we learned a valuable lesson. And we were fortunate. And it turned out when we went further, we figured out who did the shipping, we figured out who the person receiving it was, and it was not people that we knew. So it was pretty clear it was counterfeit. But it's a big problem, counterfeiting. In this industry. There's one law firm that Rovio was introduced to by us at the time many years ago, and they were the ones going after all the counterfeits over all the amusement parks that were bringing in counterfeit stuff. And this law firm's done a great, great job over the years in stopping from many, many other brands.
Around the world, you'll find countless lookalikes trying to cash in on the Commonwealth Angry Birds, some of which are officially licensed incredibly. These other brands and bootlegs are outside of the scope of this video though. Around July 2011, the circular red squeeze me tag that sat atop the plushies' foreheads would be changed to say press here, which I suppose was true. After all, it's not like you had to squeeze the whole plush in order for it to make sound. A simple tap in the forehead region would suffice. The sound chips used for production were quite small, unlike the ones used in the samples. They still had LR44 batteries, but unless you wanted to rip open the plush from the seams, they were practically non-replaceable. Horrible reality for preservation, as it is extremely uncommon for a plush with sound to be in perfect working order today. This isn't a problem for collectors who have the characters without chips, but that begs the question, why were there variations where the sound wasn't included?
So the use of sound in toys is a really interesting discussion. I always believed that we wanted to do things that were better, and I felt that the toys, because sound was so important, would be important to the toys. So we wanted to push quickly to make sure that our toys had sound in it. But you have to be cognizant of price points. Some retailers wanted lower price points. This wasn't the case with us, but some people now put things in the dollar stores. Some people things in Walmart or a Target. You might want to go without sound in the cheaper stores because it's a lot more money, and with sound in some others. But in my case, Angry Birds, we wanted everything to be with sound. However, Rovio, who wanted the product first for their online stores, and online being a new thing, they thought that not having sound was more true to the characters for the toys. So they insisted that all of their products, and they bought a lot from us to then resell on their own, they did not want sound with theirs. So we had a huge volume, or a huge chunk of quantity, I guess a huge quantity went out early on without sound. I thought it was a mistake, but everything still sold well. People didn't care. I'm not sure where the market is today. People want sound, don't want sound, but to me, it's always better to have sound. Sound usually takes a little bit longer to develop. So in some cases, you might make without sound early on and then add sound a couple of months later. That sometimes happens in production. We're looking now back 10, 15 years later on everything. Other things that I've done in the past also, I might have the bigger sizes without sound because it wasn't relevant. Or I might sometimes do small sizes and not put sound in to keep them even cheaper. We've got to do keychains without sound because you don't want to put the extra price in there. You want to keep a keychain under a certain price. So you might see the really small ones or really big ones might not have sound because they might not necessarily be necessary.
In July 2011, a second Angry Birds gift with purchase promotion began, this time with Chilean-based phone service provider Entel. If you signed up for a subscription plan of any variety starting July 25th until August 31st, you'd receive a special edition box with 1 of 5 characters inside. Red, the Blues, Chuck, Bomb, or Minion Pig. I find it neat that the boxes, aside from the obligatory Entel logo, were styled just like the other multi-packs, maintaining consistency across the line. As we have discussed, the original wave of 9 plushies officially debuted in December 2010, with a later retail release in March 2011. If you happen to be playing the game around July and were looking to purchase all the playable characters, well, that wouldn't exactly be possible. When we last discussed the game itself, Mighty Hoax was the latest update, and that was way back in February 2010. Rovio wanted to keep players engaged with the game, and what better way to do that than by introducing even more levels. This time, however, they knew they needed to shake up the scenery, as they felt the environments in the first 2 stages became rather repetitive. Same went for the bird roster. Most players are familiar with the same 5 birds, Reds, Blues, Chucks, Bombs, and Matildas, but adding some new characters would be the perfect way to keep things fresh. Out of this born Danger Above and the Big Setup, introduced in April and July 2010 respectively. In Danger Above, players take to the skies to defeat the Bad Piggies once again, this time with the help of everyone's favorite boomerang toucan, Hal. The Big Setup, on the other hand, ditched nearly all the old characters in favor of just Hal and his best friend, the Big Brother Bird, or Terence as we come to know. But for the most part, these levels served as an elaborate showcase of Terence as he attempts to rescue the flock and destroy the pig's reconstruction attempts. The dynamic duo of Hal and Terence quickly became fan favorites, and it would have been a crime against humanity if they didn't receive a plush of their own. As we saw at Toy Fair, Commonwealth was already on the case with their initial samples of Hal and Terence hidden behind the displays. Even if you weren't keeping track of every last Toy Fair pick, you might have even seen Rovio's own post about the sample Hal plush on their Facebook page. They just couldn't contain their excitement, eh? Development would continue well into 2011, but they'd at last appear on Toy Wiz in August and shopped at Angry Birds in September. With each one being around $15.99 for the 5-inch depending on where you got it, they were slightly more expensive than the first wave, which as we discussed were priced around $12.99 each. If you wanted a larger size, they also came in 8-inch, 12-inch, and 16-inch as usual. Well, actually, according to the listing on Shop at Angry Birds, technically Terence was offered in 5.5-inch and 8.5-inch. Makes sense given that he's supposed to be the biggest bird. When you put these side by side with the original set, it becomes clear that these were a notable step up in quality. This could have been the result of Commonwealth honing their craft, but I would guess this was the result of Rovio actually building out a brand licensing team that held products to a higher standard. Terence featured his darker feather spots, which was a characteristic clearly lacking on Red. His underbelly feathers were also well detailed, melding into his red feathers to match his in-game appearance. And if you look at his forehead, you can see they even included his wrinkles. Hal, meanwhile, had an especially unique feature with this opening beak, which allowed you to recreate his boomerang ability from the game. The yellow feathers surrounding his beak were also a nice touch, again matching his in-game appearance. Unfortunately, the specialized beak would only be available for the 5-inch variation, as the larger size variations featured a closed beak, for reasons that are not clear to me. When they were developing Hal, they made larger variations with the opening beak, so did they not think it was visually appealing perhaps? Was it a cost-cutting measure? We'll never know. Not that this design for the character would last too long, as in December 2011, the Hal plush would become the first to receive a major revision in accordance with the Chrome redesign in-game. This design exudes a more calm disposition, and the 5-inch version was now sold exclusively with a sealed beak too. This happened to line up with the release of the Hal Terence backpack clips, which is why you don't see a Hal with the pre-Chrome design, although samples were made to nobody's surprise. Oddly, some factories did not get the memo apparently, or if they did, they only read part of the email. The older design of Hal would continue to be produced, but with the sealed beak from the new one. This tweener Hal would not last long, although his existence forced us completionists to have 3 of the character. For as memorable as Hal and Terence were, by the end of 2010, an all-new character had stolen their thunder, in a rather magnanimous way. In December 2010, what was essentially a built-in cheat would be implemented as an in-app purchase called the Mighty Eagle.
If you find yourself getting stuck on a level, you're presented with a chance to buy the Mighty Eagle to help you progress. When you click to buy Mighty Eagle, you're taken into the quick purchase flow of the Ovi store, and the Mighty Eagle feature is then quickly added to the game. You're then free to use the Mighty Eagle to solve the level. The Mighty Eagle is truly a silver bullet to solve all your problems in one shot.
This had been a highly anticipated feature for several months at that point, as with a one-time 99-cent purchase, you could obliterate every level in the game.
So the Mighty Eagle was always a very interesting character, because when you play the game, he comes in and just completely wipes the whole board clean. So we wanted to make the Mighty Eagle plush toy a really unique character, sort of symbolic with the presence that he had in the game. And that was the reason. I don't know whether it was my idea, somebody else's, we said, let's just make him really big, and let's just make him really expensive, really hard to get. And it was an idea that just kind of stuck, and we thought it would work, and I think it actually did. We never had a Mighty Eagle character available in a more moderate price point, I think, until the movie came out, in which case we did have that, because it's a different feeling back then. And that was the reason. And I know now in the last year or two, I guess somebody else has been offering for sale a smaller Eagle. But the reason that we never did it was we just felt it was something magnificent about having just this big size Eagle. And we have a couple of them. I guess they were all the 18-inch size. But we have a couple that were even bigger, because we were trying to figure out what the right size was, because it was just so big that you had to figure out what the right magic price point would be.
So that's exactly what they did. Alongside Hal and Terence, the Mighty Eagle will be released exclusively in 18-inch, both online and in select retailers. Though if you recall, the early 2011 Toy Fairs displayed a small-scale Eagle, which thankfully was preserved. A 10-inch Eagle was also made along the way, but as you heard, Commonwealth wanted the Mighty Eagle plush to echo his aura from the game. For most, he will instantly become the biggest plush in your collection, and that's exactly what it was supposed to be. Some may even be fortunate to own one with a sound chip, which should be located in his topmost feathers. I've brought up all sorts of retailers today who carried Angry Bird plushies, and we'd be here all day if I listed them all off. One name I've yet to mention would certainly be one of the first that would come to mind, right? Walmart, the single biggest retailer in all of the US. Of course, they eventually came around on Angry Birds, and in a big way, too, as they joined Kmart in buying these massive towers packed full of plushies, with a sidekick stuffed with backpack clips for good measure. In truth, I would have brought up Walmart earlier, but behind the scenes, their overly competitive tactics created issues for Commonwealth's relationships with other retailers. Their solution? Make the toys slightly bigger. The consumer will never know, unless of course they watch this video.
So the reason that we made the toys that we sold into Walmart bigger than the other toys that we had been doing by a little bit, Walmart was the first mass market retailer we put the product into. Prior to that, we've been selling it, I guess, a little bit online, but mostly to mom and pop stores, the corner candy store, corner toy stores. And everyone's got different price points, and the average retail price, for example, was a $10 retail price. And we didn't want Walmart to come in and be buying a toy and selling it so much cheaper and be at $8. We thought that would upset the marketplace and what have you. So we gave Walmart a bigger toy at a more expensive price that Walmart could still sell it cheaper like they do normally, but it wouldn't be over the $10 price. So we were giving a smaller toy to the smaller stores, and a bigger toy to the bigger stores. Not that much bigger, but big enough. But at least we could charge a higher price, and everybody went away happy.
That's right, instead of selling the conventional 5-inch or 8-inch toys, they sold 5.75-inch and 8.75-inch toys so they could still be priced in line with all the other retailers. If you're on the lookout for one of these toys and cannot tell based on looks alone, look for the date code to be printed in the exact same font as the copyright information on the sewn-in label. At least, the vast majority of these slightly larger toys fall into that category. Stamped codes are often D11s, E12s, or I12s, so be on the lookout for those. They can have sound or not, depending on the production run. And if you were curious, here's a comparison between the 5-inch and the 5.75-inch red. Notice how the 5.75-inch is just a little bit taller. In collaboration with Finnair, the largest airliner in Finland, and the renowned Singapore Changi Airport, Rovio launched the Angry Bird Asian Challenge. During the first few weeks of September, a worldwide online search commenced to find the biggest Angry Bird fans, in order to compete abroad in an Angry Bird branded Airbus on a flight from Helsinki to Singapore. Applications were sent in by the hundreds of thousands, but ultimately only 8 people were selected to compete for the title of #1 Angry Birds fan. Around 10 journalists were also invited aboard to document the event, which took place on September 20th. During the flight, passengers were given tablets to see who progressed furthest in what was billed as the longest and highest Angry Bird flight, at over 10,000 feet in the air. This journey was no run-of-the-mill snore either, as the whole plane was decked out with Angry Birds, including music from the game, customized announcements, special cabin crew uniforms, special meals, and as you've probably been waiting for me to say, Commonwealth plushies. What makes me call this event out in particular is this enormous, and I mean enormous red plush, considerably larger than the 16-inch we talked about earlier. Officially, this red is known as the 36-inch, which will go on to be made in extremely limited quantities for essentially promotional use only, though you can find evidence of it being sold in stores as well. However, even this was not as large as they would come, as Commonwealth would even make one-off 48-inch reds for the same purpose. You do not want to know what I've been through today. Finding photos of these in action is a gem. Actual human being, for scale. And here's a normal red. Whether it's from the Asian Challenge, a press event, or even a retail store, these were about the coolest plushies one could possibly witness. As for the Asian Challenge, it was basically one large publicity stunt that got Rovio brownie points with Changi Airport. Though the winner of the challenge would be decided via a photo competition involving the plushies that came aboard. Whoever's photo got the most likes on socials was the winner. In July 2011, Rovio inked a deal with baby apparel company Swaddle Designs to release a small collection of Angry Bird themed bodysuits. Before I get ahead of myself here, you're probably wondering what this has got to do with Commonwealth. Well, as Swaddle was developing their own product line, they thought it'd be fun to bundle 4-inch plushies alongside their own products. They had Red, the Blues, Chuck, and King Pig attire, and wanted to inventory and package the plush versions of those characters with their respective products. This apparently got as far as Commonwealth providing some toys for them to use in website photos, and they even sent some products for their pre-orders, but Swaddle's ultimate idea never came to fruition. Partly because they wanted the characters to have unique facial expressions to appeal to a younger demographic, though Commonwealth wasn't willing to do that for such a small gain. Now, doing alternate facial expressions as one-off samples, that's a different question. Now, I can neither confirm nor debunk the authenticity of this photo, but it would appear as if some jumbos of Red, the Blues, and Bomb were sampled with slightly different facial expressions. This photo comes from the Rovio HQ, which has always been a treasure trove of unique and interesting merchandise. That gives this some credence, though it could easily be an edit for socials. Now here's a line of products that I can't offer an explanation for. Take a look at these. Backpack clips? No, not quite. 3-inch plushies with no clip? No, there's a black hanger attached to the top quite obviously. Okay, so they must be counterfeits. Hangers are always a staple of those kinds of things. Nope, wrong again. So then there's sample hangers. Wrong again, they have production codes, and have been seen out in the wild as far north as Canada with Red Planet distributor tags. What are they? I don't know, but they exist. I can offer a better explanation for these suction cup hangers, which were presumably done around the same time. These are 100% samples, unlike the hangers which could be either or both. Howdy, Editor Maximus here. You won't believe what I uncovered this time. So after scouring for hours on Flickr, yes, I am in serious need of help, I found this image. So check this thing out. Posted by Mo Chandler, titled Angry Birds Invade Walmart. Posted on November 4th, 2011. Only 99 views. That one fave is probably my own. Check this out. These are the hangers. And check out what's on the back of this hang tag. It says Red Planet Group. So you know it is Canada. So that explains why one of the only known public examples of the hanger has the Red Planet distributor tush tags. So how about that? You can see another red over there, Minion Pig, the main red in the foreground. You can see some other character down there, but thank goodness it says Walmart, and thank goodness we can see the back of the hang tag. Otherwise, I'd still be questioning where these originated from, but here you go. Proof they were released in Canada. Maybe another country here and there, I don't know, but Walmart, Canada. That's pretty sick. I would like to circle back to the concept of distributors, but this time a domestic one. Now, you might ask why Commonwealth would even have a distributor for the United States. That doesn't make any sense. Well, if you've been collecting since around late 2011, you probably noticed I've yet to bring up claw machines. Around the world, the amusement industry is the #1 avenue by which the average consumer acquires plush toys. If you've been to a local arcade, an annual carnival, or maybe even a theme park, you've seen the abundance of plush toys they have as prizes, both licensed and non-licensed. And as Commonwealth wanted to put their toys in as many places as they could, the amusement world was the way to go. But because they needed to make so many to fill out the prize walls and claw machines you're probably envisioning, there was simply no way they could churn out product at the same volume nor quality as retail. Hell, they didn't even want to deal with the hectic world of getting their inventory in the hands of these vendors. That's where Good Stuff Toys, the biggest name in the amusement space, came into play. Same shtick was done with White House Leisure for European markets.
So one thing that a lot of people don't realize that many different brands, we'll talk about stuffed toys in particular, you might have different companies selling the same brand of plush toys, but there are different marketplaces. We have very distinct markets where we've got what we call the mass market, Walmart, Target, one type of a store. Then you've got the specialty markets, you have the local candy store. But then you've got a whole area where a lot of stuffed animals are sold, which is in the amusement area. People like Dave & Buster's, or it might be arcades in New Jersey, or the amusement parks you might see all over the country. And you could have different companies having the licensing rights to sell the same brand in the different places because the products are really quite different. And the pricing structures are quite different. Usually the amusement area tends to get poorer quality. There were a lot of brands that won't even sell into the amusement because they feel that their toys or characters are being made to look bad if they're being sold in that marketplace. I happen to not agree with that. And our philosophy has been to try to sell the same higher quality product into those markets. So in the case of Good Stuff Toys and White House Leisure, those were two companies, Good Stuff being in America, White House Leisure being in Europe. We were using them as a distributor, but we made sure that they carried the right quality product, the top quality product, there in every case. That's been a strategy that many licensing companies actually are happy with when you're selling the right product into those places. Some people put poorer quality in there and they don't really get away with it.
Production of these toys began as far back as April 2011, and at that point they only produced the original 5 birds, plus the Minion Pig. Later production runs would bring the other pigs, as well as Hal and Terence to the amusement world. While they were objectively lower quality, being made in bottom-rung factories such as BD, FY, and HK102, they still brought these characters into the hands of millions of consumers who would have otherwise never bought their retail counterparts. These variants will never have sound chips for obvious reasons, and will have additional sewn-in labels showing all the information we just discussed. Plushies made for these purposes would also be produced in irregular dimensions, such as 6.5-inch, 10-inch, and some crazy oversized one-offs, such as this 60-inch made specially for the 2011 IAAPA convention, which incredibly is somehow even bigger than the retail 48-inch. Given the success of the products thus far, Commonwealth was always looking to try something new, as practically anything they came up with was bound to be a hot seller. Though of course, they cannot just do anything they please, as they must obtain approval from Rovio for each and every product they sell. It goes without saying that you cannot just go out there and create your own characters and market them as AB. That was never going to happen. Wasn't for lack of trying though, as they did create some characters of their own, and lobbied for recolors of existing characters. That's where samples like Pink Bomb and Tumor Chuck came from. Maybe less so in Chuck's case, that might have been just a sick joke, but Bomb? Yeah, they legitimately considered producing different colors for shits and gigs, because they knew it would sell. Perhaps these are the same reasons why this group exists, presumably owned by Yako Izalo himself. Can I call them color tests, because where were these colors used? Legitimately, somebody tell me if they know.
So, in the development process, we were always looking to add more and more characters. We knew that the more characters there were, the more collectability there might be out there early on. In fact, within the first 6 months, once the character in the Angry Birds got really hot, we even created our own birds. We had an artist do it just because I wanted more birds to be out there. Naturally, the licensors don't want you to create their own birds. They want it all to be approved by them, and of course, that's what happens. But we're always playing around and trying different things. So we might say, listen, the bomb is great. Let's go make the bomb in 3 more colors. Let's go make the red bird in a couple of different colors. Let's make these characters look a little bit different because maybe we'll be able to get something else put across. So we would experiment and do things with that and show the guys at Rovio what we were talking about. That's sometimes why people might see the red bird out there with a little bow tie, or a girl with a bow. We were just trying different things because we were trying to make them a little bit more toy oriented, not just the characters in the game oriented. And so to that extent, we've got a bunch of things that are floating around that have been made up just to see what they would look like. Because we had a factory and design room going, 24 hours a day for weeks and weeks on end. So any crazy idea we could come up with, we would try. And if we got one, it would pay for itself and be all the worthwhile. Now they're all over the place. And we would do the same thing with different sizes. We would try different materials. Occasionally, we might try materials that might be more water repellent to put something like a bathtub toy. Or we might try some toys that might be in like a light cotton material, like a terry cloth, like a bathtub toy, things along those lines. So there's all these little things floating around that we just kept trying and trying new things. That happens when you got something really, really hot. In 2024, as we're sitting here today, and you go back in the last couple of years, a Squishmallows is a very popular stuffed toy brand right now. And they were doing the same thing. Once they began to see that the moon was where they were reaching for, they probably have come up with everything you could think of. And sometimes if you got a character that's not a licensed character, you can use up every piece of material you find in the warehouse. Just imagine if I were out there and I had bought the wrong material for a different toy. Now I'm sitting with 1,000 yards of material. I could make 5,000 toys from it. Why not use the material instead of throwing it away? Because nobody cares. What's another squish model that's a little bit off brown or a little solid brown? Different with Angry Birds. I couldn't do it with an off red, but that's why you might see different ones, different colors floating around.
Speaking of Easelo, did you know he received his own one-off plush? Now, it's not like it was a humanoid abomination, no. This plush was actually based on his in-universe depiction from the announcement of Angry Birds Chrome. This also implies that Sirdar and Vesterbaka plushies exist too, and hopefully they'll surface one day. Those three were more than deserving of the honor, though they would not be the only celebrities to receive their own one-off plush, and certainly were the least famous.
So the reason that we created some other characters, or we made up samples of a character like the Conan Angry Bird, or Green Day, and a couple of others, was there was something going on at the time. I don't remember all the specifics, but there was something going on at the time. It might have been Conan was happy with liked the product a lot and was going to feature it, so we thought we'd make one for him for when he's going to feature Angry Birds on the show. Because remember, everything's about marketing and promoting what you're doing. Now, Angry Birds now has this major success and what's behind us, but when you're in front of it, you don't know what it's going to be, and you want people talking about it. So if you can get the characters on the Conan O'Brien show back then, that's a big lift. It really helps a lot. So to make up a character and make him excited about it makes sense for everybody. The same with Green Day. And I don't remember the exact tie-ins, but that's why we would have made some of those. And it's fairly easy for us. It was easy for us back at the time because we had a great design room, cranking out some great stuff. So we were asked to do that, and that's why we do it. And the same thing happened with the Ice character, where we tailored it to the race car driver, I think, Kimi Räikkönen in Finland, yeah.
And there were others too, such as Slash, for obvious reasons. That one is still undocumented though. Hopefully by the time we get around to an Angry Birds space documentary, I'll be able to show it to you. And one last thing regarding the Green Day one-offs. You would assume that the members of the band would have them, or like in the case of the Conan Bird, that Rovio at least does. But in perhaps the wildest turn of events, even more baffling than that 2010 kid we looked at earlier, this random kid, who we will call Sammy R, appears to have the Billy Joe Armstrong pig. And if you're not convinced, flip the image and compare to the factory pic. How? Why? And Rovio featured this on their Twitter page? Really? There has to be some kind of relation here, right? This cannot be a coincidence. This also calls into question the whereabouts of the other two. They're too well done to never see the light of day. Just hope they're in better hands than Billy. I'm cringing looking at this kid's collection. Man. Yikes, bro. In 2011, Angry Birds has cemented itself as a pop culture icon. In March, on the launch of the plushies at retail, the app had surpassed 100 million downloads and had two different spin-off titles, the second of which was a tie-in with 20th Century Fox's hit film Rio. By the time 2011 was all but wrapped up, Rovio had banked over $96 million, with the game having racked up 648 million downloads across all platforms. With over 200 million monthly active users, loyalty to the brand was evident. These feats were more than enough to convince the Rovio brain trust to turn Angry Birds into a full-fledged entertainment franchise.
Building an entertainment brand. So we're exposing more of the Angry Birds story, not only through the games, but we're doing that through the short animations that you can access through the game, but you can access on YouTube. We made a bunch of those. There's 110 million plus views of those videos, and they're telling part of the story, introducing new characters. And again, we don't view that as something that is just there to promote the game or the games, but it's actually those videos are there to kind of like stand and be kind of like of value in their own right. Again, games, videos. Same thing goes for the toys that we're creating, the board games that we're making. So it all has to fit with the Angry Birds world, the Angry Birds universe. So that's something that's very, very important. So yeah, it's not all about mobile games. For us, it's really it's part of this whole kind of like thing called Angry Birds.
This would be reflected in the company's name, no longer just a mobile game developer. They were now Rovio Entertainment, a grown-up organization now with their own headquarters in Helsinki, Finland. When we realized we had a big hit on our hands with Angry Birds, we looked at companies that had gone before us, especially in the mobile game sector where we were at that time very firmly. Head told CNBC.com. We saw that most gaming companies had then immediately tried to make another hit game, and we realized that it very rarely worked. Rather, we started to look at what we could do around Angry Birds, and if there was a way that we could build this into an entertainment franchise, he added. Their headcount increased from a mere 28 to 224, as they sought to capitalize on the popularity of the brand, acquiring Combo Animation, and licensing out their brand to create over 40,000 individual pieces of merchandise. And they never would have achieved those milestones without Commonwealth, who continued to be at the forefront of consumer products.
Angry Birds was first an iPhone app. It went to #1 everywhere, and when that happened, we had designed the game in a way that we could expand on it to take it everywhere to all other gaming platforms, but also that it would be such a brand that we could extend beyond gaming also. So then, as time went on and the game still remained very popular, we started expanding to animations, to consumer products, and now we have about 1/3 of our staff is actually working on games, and the rest are working on something completely different.
For 2012, Rovio attempted to shift the brand's image, as the brand's presentation prior had been what you might call childish. Many look back upon that era of the brand with fond nostalgia, though you have to admit, these boxes and tags lack professionalism. Heck, you can point to something as simple as the resolution of the tag art. It is difficult to see in person, but with the benefit of having the original art files, you can plainly see that the art they use lacked the fidelity you'd normally see. These assets are plainly ripped straight from the game, perhaps upscaled by artists here and there, but now with the requisite budget and staff, it was time they created a true brand identity. Now, if you ordered an Angry Bird plush online or walked into your retail store, you'd find the same toys as last year, but now with red and black streamlined branding. Nearly every product that was carried over into the new year would be updated to fit within this new style. The new hang tags were now circular, with a silhouette of the iconic Poche's background gleaming on the front. Sewn in labels were now primarily black too, and were essentially the inverse of what we had previously. What a lot of people don't bring up with these is the backside, which now actually used the official typeface for the Angry Birds brand, and now reflected the fact that Rovio was an entertainment corporation. Pretty Damn Quicks, retail platforms, and the 4-packs would all be revised with new artwork, although the templates for the most part remained identical. Production of these products would go into effect in late 2011, and wouldn't arrive on the shelves at retailers until March or April, which coincidentally lined up with the debut of a new plush, Bubbles. On October 21st, 2011, one of the franchise's many spin-offs, Angry Birds Seasons, received its second Halloween-themed level pack, called Hamoween. What made this update special weren't the levels themselves, but the character that made his franchise debut, who we know to be Bubbles. He would later arrive in the original title in the Birthday Party update on December 11th, 2011. It was during this time that Commonwealth began initial development on the Little Mimu Man. There was a last-second design change, as some of you will know, and then they made the eyes too big, the beak too wide, but eventually they got there, right as the year wrapped up. And because of Bubbles' inflation ability, they figured they'd make two different plushies, one representing his conventional state, and one representing his puffed-up state. Production began in January 2012, meaning he'd debut on ToyWiz and shopped at Angry Birds about 3 months later in April. The normal Bubbles was priced at $13.99 for the 5-inch variation, though was also available in 8-inch more sparingly. The inflated Bubble started at $16.99 for the 8-inch variation, and was also sold in 12-inch and 16-inch. Neither were sold in each and every size variation, which logically made sense if you played the game. Like Hal Terence, the Bubbles plush was a notable step up from the initial wave, as he featured a curved beak and some goofy head feathers. The inflated version was unlike anything we had seen before, being a huge round ball with puffy cheeks and a shrunken face, topped off by a silly tongue stitched to the beak. He, along with Hal and Terence, would create what we've come to know as the classic set Wave 2. Retailers were shipped full cases of these, though they could also be found in various other assortments including Good Stuff and White House Leisure cases. Interestingly, White House distributed a 5-inch inflated Bubbles, which remains the only official way to acquire that plush in that scale. We've already debunked the misconception that Hal's redesign came in 2012, though the reason why some would assume that is because they figure these three were redone in one fell swoop. In fact, if I polled most collectors on when exactly these changes occurred, the time period would fall much later than when they actually were made. The Blues and Chuck, who as I pointed out were two of the most flawed plushies of the original set, were given facelifts in April 2012, presumably at the behest of Rovio. The Blues now had the game-accurate 2 tail feathers instead of 3, and Chuck's underbelly was revised to make it look complete. Although pattern techniques are maintained across these variants, the dead stare would be ousted in favor of these cross-eye designs. An open beak version of the Blues were also sampled during this stage, which potentially could have been sold as a different style, but sadly it never made it to production. Would have given some much needed variety to those who like to collect the triplets. Because these came after the initial boom of merchandise production, some of the oddball size variants can be tricky to come by. We'll touch upon the 4-inch minis later, though I will speak on the jumbo variants. Good luck finding these guys, as they were almost exclusively sold as amusement variants. As of today, we don't have much evidence for them even existing, especially the retail variants. Backpack clips are similarly difficult to find, especially if you want them on a card. And oddly, only the Blues would be sold as a color match finish variant. No evidence for a Chuck has ever surfaced. Just like Hal, you can find later releases that still use the old patterns, going as deep as February 2014 for some regions. But we'll touch more on that later. Speaking of production errors, this generation also gifted us the mustache pig without eye bags. He must have been a real looker in Toys R Us back then. Would you have bought it over the regular one? In June 2012, Commonwealth reached an agreement with Family Dollar and Dollar General stores, who you will certainly be familiar with if you live here in the States, to release budget assortments of the 5-inch plushies. As we've established, when stores wanted to sell a full-scale plush at a lower price point, Commonwealth would typically sell them a toy without sound or maybe even a 4-inch. For Dollar General, Commonwealth pulled the same shtick they had done in the past, by selling them toys without sound. But in this instance, they took it one step further. Instead of giving them the shaggier fur we normally associate with the plushies made in 5-inch, they gave them a shorter cut minky coat, making them a distinct variation. Their set included Red, the older design of the Blues, and Bomb. That's all that's been documented, at least. There could very well be others, but I haven't seen them. Similarly, Family Dollar stores would receive what we collectors call matte fur plushies. However, their assortment shockingly had sound, and they got all 5 of the original birds with their updated designs. Have to assume there's a Minion Pig too, but it would be virtually indistinguishable. In July 2012, Rovio would once again shake up the brand image by mandating their licensees implement changes laid out in their latest issue of brand guidelines. Out with the red and black aesthetic, in with the much more fitting light blue and white. Red and black was perhaps a bit too edgy for a brand like Angry Birds, and didn't communicate the message they intended to send. As quickly as it arrived, it was out, and so began what we collectors call the 4th generation, as this was the 4th major packaging design change. Hang tags were now rectangular, retaining the silhouette of poached eggs, but not with the color you associate with it. Sewn-in labels reverted back to being primarily white, though the logo would stay white this time. All products on the market would undergo the change, with some older products slated to return under this new style, such as the obscure multi-packs. Unfortunately, none of them would be put back into production, only being seen at Toy Fair 2013.
So the reason that you see different hang tag colorations and styles and different sewn labels over the course of the years that we had the Angry Birds line was that Rovio would be changing the look of the brand a couple of different times, and we would just go along with it. So there was the original tag artwork, and as As the brand became more sophisticated and as it began to grow up, they would try different things for whatever the reason. So you'd see that color palette would be put across all their licensed products, not just ours. We were just one. So it might be in a T-shirt packaging, it might be on underwear, on towels, and anything else that you might see. You'd see that same kind of tagging, and we would just, make a rolling change or a running change and be there right along with it. I mean, we were one of the forefronts of their licensing programs, and so they would ask us to do it, and we would do that.
On August 20th, 2012, Angry Birds Seasons received an update consisting of 20 new schoolyard-themed levels in an episode called Back to School. Levels were decked out with back-to-school gear such as textbooks, pencils, apples, and dunce caps. However, like the Halloween update, this episode's significance is more so related to the debut of a new flock member, who we know to be Stella. Stella's plush counterpart was developed as far back as April 2012, allowing Commonwealth to release the toy to coincide with the update. Unlike characters we have seen in the past, multiple different Stella facial expressions were not only considered, but fully sampled as well. The three they debated over were the happy face, the angry face, and of course the one they settled on, the side-eye. Now, everyone is going to have their own opinion as to which one they should have done. I'd personally argue that none of them were the correct one. The two Princess Leia plushies served as a fine example of how she should have been produced. But I must admit, having different facial expressions is certainly fun, but it would be better if you could pick and choose the one that you preferred. Despite the earliest Stellas being produced as far back as May 2012, she would not be released until November. ToyWiz and Shop at Angry Birds posted her up for about $15.99 for the 5-inch variation, and like characters we had seen before, was offered in various other sizes. She, along with Bubbles, would also receive backpack clips in extremely limited quantities. This assortment is known as the infamous Mix A, which was distributed towards the end of the calendar year. Documentation is limited, though we do know for sure they were sold in the US and in Canada, likely making the cartridge versions North American exclusive. The Bubbles in particular is quite the sought-after piece for those who like to scale their flock, but don't forget about good old Stella. She would later be sold as a Rovio import, which again came with a hang tag rather than a card back like the North American release. In all fairness to Commonwealth, the Stella plush we did get was true to the design they chose, featuring her distinctive long tail and head feathers, as well as nailing that signature side-eye facial expression. Out of sheer technicality, she is not considered a part of Wave 2, as she would never actually be added to the Hal Terence Bubbles PDQ I showed earlier. Instead, Commonwealth released her within randomly assorted batches of plushies, and as a standalone item. If you happen to find the plush at retail around early 2013, you might have been able to find the obscure Stella tag variation. Instead of the typical light blue rectangle you'd expect, you'd find a bright pink one in its place, with Stella plastered front and center. Entire PDQs were planned at some point and were even shown off at Toy Fair 2013, but per everyone's collective recollection, they never made it to production. I believe it's now time we transition into said 2013, but not before we appreciate the feats achieved in the now glorified year of 2012. Across all platforms, Angry Bird games have been downloaded over 1.7 billion times, with nearly 300 million active users per month. Total revenue was up 101% compared to 2011, with Rovio generating nearly $200 million in sales, half of which was attributed to the merchandise. And once again, take a guess as to who was responsible for a good chunk of that. Commonwealth. In fact, they themselves sold over $400 million worth of Angry Birds, apparently double as compared to 2011. And this was at a time where the plush industry was on the outs. According to a contemporary source, in 2011, US sales of plush toys fell 21% to $1.3 billion, which might sound like a lot, but that was actually the biggest drop of any measured category by the Toy Industry Association, aka the same people who put on Toy Fair. And you got Commonwealth out here not only swimming in reds, but in dollars as well. The franchise could not be stopped, hence all the new game releases throughout the year, and all the wild collaborations that had transpired. It was inevitable 2013 would live in its shadow, but sales continued to stay strong into the new year. Toy Fair 2013 showcased several new lines that felt like they came straight from those early 2010 days, as they each had some sort of gimmick. Shakers and their miniature counterparts were the same toys we came to know, but had battery-powered motors inside that allowed the characters to, well, shake. The larger ones were around 6.5 inch and were activated via a button on their head. The smaller ones were the same scale as the backpack clips but with no clip attachment and a small retractable pull string that activated the feature. Unlike the larger ones, unfortunately, their batteries were non-replaceable. Beanies were yet another concept that took the 4-inch minis and made them into hand-sized weighted bags. All the main birds were sampled, but of the 4 pigs, only the minion pig made the cut, making this a set of 10. They've got a nice feel to them for the most part, especially the ones with the sample tags. They've got a little bit more heft. I also find their splash screen mock-up tag and the one that says collect them all to be a curious decision. Though, perhaps most curiously, a set of 6 3-inch scale plushies were put on display, eerily reminiscent of those sold at Chinese McDonald's locations in 2012. If you observe them with little scrutiny, you probably would assume they were those McDonald's plush hangers. These were different though, as the character assortment was slightly tweaked with the blues instead of Hal, and were notably not hangers. Commonwealth saw what Creative did with those Happy Meal toys, and sought to bring the concept over here to the States, in a rare instance where a US company ripped off a Chinese one. These were to be called the gift box set, with art of the character plastered all over a small box with a door, which housed the plush inside. None of these would make it into production, but showed Commonwealth still had the ambition to come up with new, debatably creative lines.
So the shaker products and others, that other featured product, were all things that we were experimenting with to come up with featured plush, which is a term within our industry. So the shakers, we wanted the characters to move. I mean, the characters in the game, they move. So anything we could figure out the way to move. So with little vibrating mechanisms, walking mechanisms, other kind of things that I say walking mechanisms, different kind of mechanisms that could go inside the toy that might simulate some of the actions of the characters, we thought would be great, because we're always looking to have different pieces. And they might have been for collectors back then. When I say collector, it might be different than the true collector that appears now 10, 15 years later. But we knew there were always people that would have wanted more expensive products, more featured product, and that's why we would try to do things. You see that in other brands as well. There are brands I've done in my career where we had the regular characters, but I'd make certain ones talk, or maybe the arms would move, and that would have a little bit more featureization to it. And that's what the shakers and things like that actually were a result of. But we were able to create many more things than we actually had a market for, because there's just so many slots that these retailers would give us. And remember, the early days was before you had a lot of stuff online. In the world of today, every single one of these characters that I created that Rovio would have approved, we would have had selling in our own store or on Amazon in a store that we would manage. At least we would have everything out there. But back then, if I had to go to Toys R Us, there was just so much space they could give me, just so many things that we could carry that would make sense. So that would be a natural limiting factor back then.
What they didn't show at Toy Fair that year would be their next wave of revisions. As I alluded to earlier, all the Angry Bird character designs were revised near the end of 2010. These are known as the Chrome Designs. The name owes its origins to the browser-based PC game that came out in May 2011, but in reality, the designs first debuted in-game in Angry Birds Rio. It's more noticeable in some characters than others, but nowhere was it more evident than with the Bad Piggies. They're the reason why we refer to these as the Chrome Designs, as Rio doesn't exactly have pigs, at least in the traditional sense. Though, if you're looking at the franchise overall, you'll find them being used as far back as the Season's Greetings animation, and that was all the way back in 2010. So you'd think the plushies would be based on the latest designs. Evidently, that was not the case. This wasn't a big deal necessarily, given that the design changes weren't drastic, and the plushies weren't exactly inaccurate, but at some point you'd like to see them make the change. The question was, would it be worth overhauling the plushies for minimal gain? Starting in late 2012 and into January 2013, Commonwealth would try their hand at sampling the Chrome Pigs, and after a couple of rounds, they had a set that could have potentially passed for production. That would be as far as they ever got, sadly. Amongst all the unreleased items that we've looked at today, this to me was the biggest miss. These finalized designs were a major improvement over the originals, especially if they carried over the golden crown for King Pig. If a license were to ever return to Commonwealth somehow, some way, I'd personally lobby for these to finally make it out. What they did do, however, was make the 5-inch helmet pig slightly larger for Gen 4, a change that was far overdue. And then they never sold it. In fact, they completely discontinued the 5-inch helmet pig for Gen 4. 8-inch would live on, but not this guy. Wonder why? It should be apparent by now that Commonwealth was always devising new ways to feature the Angry Birds characters, no matter how off the wall the concept was. Often, these would never make it past the conceptual stage, unlike the Toy Fair oddities we've looked at so far. But what about those ideas that were never moved along in development? This set of May 2013 product boards, which mind you were put together after Toy Fair, showcases perhaps the most eclectic set of ideas we've seen yet. A bird launcher that happens to be a net and not a slingshot? Supposedly, it was going to feature sounds and was fit for a mini-scale plush, perhaps a 4-inch mini. An actual inflatable Bubbles plush? This gets the full 3 stars for style points. Would be curious to see how that would work. A light projector so you could gaze up upon your ceiling and admire your favorite mobile game characters in some blocks. Actually a really neat toy. Reminds me of a projector turtle plush I adored as a kid. A light up plush. I'll believe it when I see it. Good luck making transparent fur, Commonwealth. And then there's this pair of pop-up plushies, embodying those rubber cap toys we've all messed with at some point. Like Steven said, if they can make the characters move, that was a win in their book. A fun set of concepts to be sure, though none of it actually exists as far as I know. Despite all these exciting things happening right at the start, 2013 would be an uneventful year for Commonwealth, as the popularity of the Angry Birds franchise began to plateau. The year-over-year numbers bear out this stagnation, but that isn't to say absolutely nothing was happening. Commonwealth finally returned to the well of promotions, this time partnering with the Serbian-based Oddities group to host 2 separate promotions, where collectible sticker coupons would eventually redeem a dollar store quality plush. Oddities owns the supermarket chain Maxi, who would host both promotions, with similar redemption policies to that of Tesco stores when they had TCC. The first promotion began on December 14th, 2012, and ran all the way through March 2013. The same promotion would return starting August 16th, 2013, and ran up until October 13th. Because Maxi required so many toys, Commonwealth decided to produce them cheaper, pulling the same stunt they did with the dollar stores in the US. The plushies available through this promotion marked the return of the dreaded 5-inch matte fur variants, with no sound chips this time either. What makes this promotion especially notable, however, were the exclusive matte furs that were available. Hal and Stella, who were not included in the dollar store assortments, were given away as a part of this promotion. Hal would remain the only exclusive one, however, as the Stella would later be sold as part of the Hogs and Kisses set, released at Target stores in 2014. This makes him quite the rare piece, despite being a lower quality variant. Oddities would have another promotion in late 2014, but this time it was for their Indonesian chain Super Indo. According to their flyer, the plushies available this time were fluffy fur with sound. Though, as the promotion is super obscure, we don't have a complete list as to what was available and confirmation of what they looked like. Have to assume there was something off about them, considering this was late into 2014. Did they use the older design of blue? Was it old stock? A fresh batch? We'll perhaps never know. 4-packs also made their triumphant return in 2013, but not for the United States. Character once again ordered the bundle to be sold in the English market, but this time with 4th-gen box art and updated designs of the Blues and Chuck. And if it weren't for my discerning eye, I wouldn't be able to tell you about an Estonian exclusive variant of the 4-pack that was also sold for Gen 4. Oddly, this one had an assortment that we had never seen before, containing Bomb, King Pig, and presumably Red and Matilda. This one was imported by Estonian toy shop Karapoeg Poo, which translates to Winnie the Pooh for us English speakers. In my lengthy list of distributors I put up earlier, there's a chance you saw a second United Kingdom distributor who you may not exactly associate with toys, Puffin Books. They are one of the top children's publishers in all of Britain, and as you can imagine, they had their fair share of Angry Bird books at the time, one of which was a book adaptation of the Wreck the Halls animation, which could be found with a good old Commonwealth, a 4-inch mini red to be exact. I mentioned this instance of a plush bundle and not the Toons DVD sets or the Lumine kits, because this was a product that Commonwealth actually endorsed themselves. Those other products happened to use Commonwealth plushies, but weren't deemed a part of the official collection. And the last European oddity from 2013 comes courtesy of the UK again, this time in the form of the 8-inch retail platform. How did they make these unique, you may ask? Well, these were given a backplate for some reason. Was this to make the toy look more extravagant than it actually was? A common method of presenting a toy in the UK? Not entirely sure. Okay, I tell a lie. This part is actually the last of the European oddities, but will get its own chapter because of the sheer magnitude of its oddity. The Polish distributor for Angry Bird products was a company called EP, and they have been a partner of Commonwealth for many years. Their 2013 line of products had a unique quirk, as they were given plushies with 2nd-gen tags. And not just hang tags either, this applied to the sewn in labels as well. I don't know how or why this blunder was made, why that art was still floating around 2 years after the fact, or how nobody had noticed. But this is probably one of those instances where they said,
We do not care.
but if you want a Bubbles, Stella, or updated Blue or Chuck with the older style tags, this is your opportunity. A similar situation went down here in the US with Toys R Us. For one rogue assortment of backpack clips were sold on 2nd-gen cards. I have 2 of these myself, though you would only ever know if you kept them on the original card. Commonwealth would continue production of these classic plushies up through 2014, where production for retail at last ceased. Their license was not up as they were supposedly signed up through 2017, so what were they to do in the meantime? The Angry Birds movie was on the horizon, though there would still be demand for those classic plushies sold nearly part of the decade. With the rise of e-commerce sites like Shop.Angry Birds, Toy Wiz, and now most significantly Amazon, this allowed them to continue selling the toys when retailers had soured on the brand, and make just enough to satisfy their market demand. They even launched their own website where they could sell the toys directly. The first post-retail production run began in May 2015, where the classic plushies would return, this time being e-commerce exclusive. They would be produced to look exactly like the ones sold in 2012 to 2013, even retaining the same copyright information on the tags. But of course, with our knowledge of production codes, we can tell them apart. This second act wasn't without its hiccups, however, especially when you closely inspect the pigs. Somehow, the 5-inch variations now had the shaggier fur formerly reserved for the birds and the larger pig variations. I suppose they thought the 5-inch pigs with a longer cut looked awkward back in 2010, but here they didn't even bother. The Minion King Pig would return as well, which was a mistake actually cropping up towards the tail end of 2013 for the next time Russian assortments. But for some reason it was only on the 8-inch variation in both instances. Although they were no longer doing monthly production runs, they were still selling enough toys to justify making more and more each year, well into 2017 no less. But you would figure they would cease altogether in 2018 when the gig was up, but incredibly, they continued. Now under a phony name to disguise themselves as some general wholesaler with old stock, Sallow Toys. Well, if it isn't our old friend Commonwealth Toy, an ex-Angry Bird licensee wanted for... Well, wait a minute. It was only for a few select characters such as Bomb and the Mighty Eagle, but the fact they kept going behind Rovio's back is what's astonishing to me. There are Bombs and Eagles from as late as November 2018 for crying out loud, and Bomb didn't even have the correct sound chip tag. In 2019, Amazon would impose stricter seller guidelines that would have forced Commonwealth to show evidence of a license, and as you'd expect, they didn't want to go through that trouble. Thus ended an era after nearly an entire decade. And so, there you have it. That is quite literally the entire lore of Commonwealth Angry Bird plushies. At least, the classic ones, that is. I mean, we didn't cover everything today, right? Just Wave 1, Wave 2, Stella, some of the celebrities, and other bits and bobs here and there, but heck, we didn't even cover the Fun Video TV set, birthday party, or heck, even the Hammam High Birds, which these are all things that you could probably well argue should be a part of the classic set documentary. It just feels as if those sets have their own intricate history and are probably deserving of their own documentary. And heck, this video is probably well over 2 hours long at this point, and good 2 years in the making. I think, really, if we're looking at the big picture here, I think it truly started back when I first created this YouTube channel back in January of 2018. I'm not entirely sure I had Angry Birds in mind at that point, but here we are, and this is perhaps the culmination of my Angry Bird plush collecting journey. You know, I always try and top my previous video, make it better than the last. I don't think it's possible in this instance. I think this is the culmination of the Maximus Overdrive YouTube channel. And really, I don't even know how to end a video like this. I really didn't have anything in mind. And I don't really know if there's anything left to say. I think it's all been said. Well, there is one more thing I would like to say. Obviously, I am obsessed with these things. I think at some point it does become more than a hobby and more than a passion. I'm just not entirely sure what the word for it is. I'd like to think it's love. Love for stuffed toys from an oddly specific toy company, of a dead mobile gaming franchise. I mean, this is one of those things where people tell you to grow up, buddy, right? Not me. I still adore these things, and I'm not sure that love will ever end. At least, as long as I have this YouTube channel, and as long as I have you guys. You know, you guys are more than an audience to me. People all around the world, the United Kingdom, Poland, Hungary, Estonia, Sweden, of course Finland, all around Asia, Russia, China, Japan, Singapore, Australia, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, of course people in the USA. I don't want to leave anyone out, but all of you, thank you. I mean, one person can only experience so much and accumulate so much knowledge. This video wouldn't be possible without people like you. You know, some of those Serbian and Indonesian promotions, I mean, how the heck would I ever know about that kind of stuff? There's no advertising for any of that stuff over here. How would you ever know, right? And, of course, most importantly, I'd like to thank all the people with Commonwealth. You know, specifically Steven, of course. I don't think I've ever met a guy quite like that. He is the coolest CEO, chairman you could ever imagine. He's good. He's well into this stuff as well. He's like a clone of me, except, you know, business savvy and all that. Just a cool cucumber. And of course, Alec Kessler, he's the guy who referred me to him at first. I can't thank him enough. I try and keep in contact with them. You know, other people who have, you know, slightly contributed to this as well. Sheriff, you know, Peter Vesterbach, I talked with him for a little bit before. He shared some insights about China back in the Bad Piggy Bank video, at least the first version of that. But to everyone who's contributed to this project, I mean, you know who you are. Thank you. Really. Truly. You guys are the fellow plush enthusiasts. All shapes and sizes, all different demographics, all around the world. And then you got me. Perhaps the only guy who is capable of doing a video like this, right? I've got all the plushies, all the knowledge, the passion, and so here it is. Perhaps the definitive Angry Birds merchandise documentary. We don't need some kind of encyclopedia or online database. We have this video. Gotta reflect on something like this. It's an achievement, and one that I don't think will ever be topped. You know, Angry Bird merchandise, it accounted for around about 50% of the sales in 2012, right? I am the Bring Back 2012 guy, after all. That's my year. I live for that year. You know, I've said before, I live for this shit, right? You know, there's two buckets you can fall in as an Angry Bird fan. You can love the games, you can love the merch. Some people love both. And to some extent, I think I'm like that, but I'm definitely more of a merchandise guy. Let's just say that. I love Angry Birds, but not the game. The merchandise. And I think that is a good place to end, right? And so if you have any comments, questions, or complaints, you can let me know in the comment section below. And with that I say, peace out. Oof, what a project that was. What should I do next?